Hey Mockrock, did you know that you and PJiggles uploaded the same video on the same day? Hey Mock, don't know if you realized this, but you and PJiggles uploaded the same video on the same day. 2 videos about the same topic? Impossible! I can't believe that 2 YouTubers uploaded the same video on the same day. Yo Mockrock, just wanted to check in case you didn't know. Do you realize that you and PJiggles uploaded the same video on the same day? Yes, actually, because moments after I posted the teaser to my Twitter, he hit me up, so I knew this was coming for a while. So today we're just going to take a look at his and see how they stack up. I know some vague details about his that differentiate it from mine. I don't think it's Tears of the Kingdom centric at all, whereas mine, to be fair, also isn't Tears of the Kingdom centric, but it does cover Tears of the Kingdom along with a lot of other Zelda games. It's kind of an all-encompassing link, whereas his video just covers all 3 links, which I think is going to be really interesting. All right, let's get into it.
A Link to the Past was not only an incredible game, but it pretty much perfected the adventure game style of gameplay and exploration that the first Zelda game laid the groundwork for. The creators of Grand Theft Auto and Dark Souls, 2 of the biggest names in gaming, have both cited A Link to the Past as a main source of inspiration for those series. Ocarina of Time not only set the groundwork for all 3D Zelda games to follow, but almost all 3D games in general, and it's been the single highest rated game ever released for a very long time now.
I think that number rankings for video games in general is just kind of an inherently flawed concept. Ocarina of Time has many flaws, even compared to later Zelda games, in terms of sort of cultural importance and what it did and how good it still feels to play and how well it's aged all these years later. In many ways, I think it does deserve to be the highest rated game of all time. That's why this is so messy. That's kind of a conversation for a different video. Frankly, objectively, no, Ocarina of Time certainly does not deserve to be the top rated video game of all time, but you know, in the same vein, I get it.
And many years later, Breath of the Wild, currently the most sold Zelda game of all time, changed open world gaming forever, which has debatably been the biggest genre in gaming since its release in 2017.
That is absolutely true. Now, so much of the cool part about Breath of the Wild is what was innovative at the time. I think Breath of the Wild is actually set up to age pretty poorly as time goes on. Tears of the Kingdom just absolutely blows it out of the water. It's clear that so much of Breath of the Wild's development cycle went into those cool, innovative things that 6 years later already don't really feel innovative anymore, because that's what happens, right? Things that seem obvious but no one had done before in video games, they get adopted as soon as the actual obvious steps are taken, and then it gets distributed and just becomes sort of part of the ecosystem. But as far as the actual influence it did have during its release window, yes, absolutely. You saw over the next handful of years, more and more of its ideas just became kind of infused into video games as a whole.
Even within Nintendo themselves has Breath of the Wild inspired other games. It's often called the most important game of the 2010s for a good reason.
Yes.
All this is to say, The Legend of Zelda is an incredibly important franchise, and if you ask me, the single most influential video game franchise of all time. So then why does its representation in Smash Bros. Suck so much?
Here we go. And for the record, I 100% agree with this.
Nowadays, there are 6 Zelda characters in Smash, or should I say 3. Link, Zelda, and Sheik. Those are the 3 Zelda characters. Young Link and Toon Link are just faster versions of Link, and Ganondorf is just a slower version of Captain Falcon for some reason. There's a lot more to it than that, but personally I don't think The Legend of Zelda's representation in Smash is very well done at all.
This is almost a matter of suffering from success, right? Because the Zelda series is so influential, so many of its characters got into Smash very early, and the early days of Smash didn't really represent characters all that well a lot of the time. And Sakurai has this hang up about changing characters. He kind of considers them to be fighting game characters, right? Where if you brought Ryu into the next Street Fighter and just radically overhauled him, he doesn't have a Shoryuken, he doesn't have a Tatsu anymore, it's like, well, that's not Ryu. Oh, well, if I brought Ganondorf into Brawl and completely changed how he worked from Melee, then he would no longer feel like Ganondorf, referring to Ganondorf, the fighting game character, right? If I brought Link into Ultimate and he didn't have Spin Attack as his up special, he would no longer feel like Link, the fighting game character. It's a philosophy I just don't really agree with. I think there is a kernel of truth in there. It's not a kernel of truth that I stuck to in my video at all, by the way. I don't know how much PJiggles is going to adhere to it, but I do really think that character designs are allowed to be more flexible in Smash.
There's a big difference between having a lot of representation and good representation. For example, Persona only has 1 character, but it's represented amazingly. Joker's moveset is a good example of what a Persona user can do in the series. Its one stage has entirely different designs based on other Persona games. Joker's alts also reference other Persona games, and he even has a costume with an alt inspired by an important character in his game story. He has some extremely unique qualities to his victory screens that references his home games, etc, etc, etc.
Joker is a character that Sakurai personally really likes his franchise, and you can tell.
On the contrary, Pokemon has a lot of characters and stages, but I think its representation is lacking as well. Besides Red and Leaf, who aren't even called that in Smash, there are absolutely zero beloved human characters in the game, not even as a spirit.
I can probably count on my fingers the amount of time I spent giving a crap about spirits in Ultimate, but I'm really surprised to hear that there are no human characters in there. I haven't checked. If there were trophies, I would have checked.
So that's the difference between good and bad representation. And if you ask me, The Legend of Zelda falls squarely in the second category.
Yes.
Even though Zelda has one of the most amount of characters in the game for one franchise. In the first Smash game with only 12 slots, one of them was from The Legend of Zelda, being Link, the series' main character. Makes sense. And then the next Smash game had 14 newcomers, and 4 of them were from The Legend of Zelda. Zelda herself and Sheik, the first swap character in the series, thus sharing the same character slot, Ganondorf, and Young Link.
And that swap mechanic at the time was super cool, by the way. Zelda is represented horribly in Smash, Sheik less so. She has almost entirely made-up moves, and I hate the fact that there's no heart, but by and large, she still feels like sort of how you'd expect Sheik to feel, whereas Zelda kicking around, that's even weirder than Link doing it.
Melee was infamously very rushed, and to pad out the amount of newcomers, a lot of them were clone characters. And of those 6 clones introduced, 2 of them were from The Legend of Zelda. Young Link being a clone of Link, obviously, and Ganondorf being a clone of Captain Falcon. And to this day, this is my least favorite decision ever made in the Smash series. After Melee, we had to wait a long 7 years for the next Smash game, and after all that time when it released, the world was finally blessed with a new Legend of Zelda character. That being... Are you kidding me?
I know a lot of people want Midna. Listen, Twilight Princess is one of my favorite games of all time, but I think she'd be a little bit of a weird choice if we're being honest. And she'd probably come with the wolf anyways, in which case it would still just kind of be 3 Links, one of them being Wolf Link. Toon Link represents a lot of different games. I know less so at the time, but nevertheless, he does. I think just changing Link to be Twilight Princess Link was fine.
Now, to bring a bit of positivity into this video, I actually kinda like the idea behind Toon Link's inclusion. You see, between Melee and Brawl, The Legend of Zelda got 5 new Zelda games with this cartoony art style. The Wind Waker, 4 Swords as a side game in the GBA port of A Link to the Past, 4 Swords Adventures, the Minish Cap, and Phantom Hourglass.
I actually forgot the count was already that high by the time Brawl came around, so okay, take back what I said, it makes even more sense. I know less so at the time.
So for a while there, it really seemed like this would be the new art style for the series. But obviously in that time we also got Twilight Princess, being the only Zelda game released between Melee and Brawl to not have this art style, since it got a lot of backlash.
And at the time, having 2 Links that looked like Twilight Princess and the Wind Waker, that's about as different as you can make them, right? They only vaguely look like they would even be from the same franchise, so that's sort of how it's justified in my eyes.
That said, he really is just Young Link again, a smaller, weaker, faster version of Link. That's all he is, which really sucks considering just how much potential there is in Wind Waker for his moveset.
Toon Link bothers me a lot more than Young Link in that respect because he is not a clone, right? If you look at his animations, they're different than adult Link's. So they took work to make. Young Link, yeah, okay, just shrink his skeleton down and copy paste the animations over. It's a clone, fine. That's what you got to do to get another character in the game, you do it.
Then we get Smash 4, which didn't change the roster of Zelda characters at all from Brawl. The only real changes are that Zelda and Sheik became separate characters, meaning they each get a new down special, and Sheik also got a new side special. But Ganondorf and Toon Link weren't changed at all and were still just clone characters. Damn it. Oh, and Link also wasn't changed, but that's okay.
Not according to my video.
And now, 4 years later, in the newest Smash game, yeah, you already know. The only change they made to the Zelda roster was bringing back Young Link, a clone from 17 years ago, meaning Link now has 2 clones in the same game. Awesome.
Young Link I get. Young Link sort of holds down the classic Zelda style, while Breath of the Wild Link theoretically sort of moves forward. The thing is, he didn't actually really move forward. They changed his grab, they gave him a new bomb, a cool item to be fair, but like, they're still way too close to each other. If Young Link wants to represent the classic Zelda style in Smash, that's cool, but Breath of the Wild Link should have been changed up way more if that was the case. I'm wondering if there was some kind of time crunch issue with Ultimate, and if that wasn't happening, he would have been changed more. That applies to a lot of characters, but again, there's just that sort of core philosophy that Sakurai has of not changing them too much. Toon Link, He got a new forward smash and a couple properties of his moves changed. That's not good enough.
This is where the crux of this series' crappy representation lies, being their outdated movesets, which I'll go over one by one while giving ideas accompanied with illustrations of how I would change these moves, starting with Link of course. And oh my god, I hate what they've done here. This game was entirely made to challenge the traditions of all other 3D Zelda games. As you probably know, Breath of the Wild is extremely different from its older brothers. No traditional items, no traditional dungeons, a completely non-linear open world, and no big focus on a huge storyline. Link himself even looks completely different than he ever has before, no longer wearing the iconic green tunic and pointy hat, instead sporting no hat and a new blue design. And they decided to change Link's design to this in Ultimate. And do you want to know what this means for his moveset? He now has glowy remote bombs and he's back to having a boring boomerang again.
I personally drastically prefer this boomerang. The Gale boomerang, it could theoretically do cool stuff once in a blue moon, but by and large, no, it just didn't. Reverse A boomerang does cool stuff, but if we're talking about in terms of like overall series representation and just concept of characters, yeah, I agree. Now, if they hadn't brought young Link back, I would actually be kind of on board with Link maintaining sort of the core of the series identity. He is supposed to be sort of a cross-series amalgamation, and I can see wanting to sort of keep some of that anchored in place. But again, young Link exists and could do that himself. Toon Link is already the speedy, evasive Link. They didn't really need to make young Link play like that. They could have just had him use, the classic arsenal, play a sort of a classic style, maybe buff him in certain areas to make up for his short range, and then do what I'm assuming PJiggles is about to do and completely just go to town with Breath of the Wild Link.
Let's just keep him almost the exact same, even though Breath of the Wild was designed to be different. Instead of this made-up recovery using the spin attack, why not have him use Revali's Guild to fly upwards and then glide forwards for a bit with his paraglider?
Everyone expected this before Smash Ultimate came out. This isn't what I chose personally. I went with Ascend in my moveset because mine again includes Tears of the Kingdom. I think if you were to release a new Link nowadays, this would be kind of a weird choice unless you were doing specifically only Hero of the Wild content, in which case I still might argue in favor of Ascend, but at the time, yeah, this should have been up special.
Why not give him the ability to climb walls, or at least cling to them like some other characters, which you also do all the time in this game.
So in my moveset, I intentionally chose not to give him a wall cling, but that is specifically because he has the claw shots back and they anchor into walls like they do in Melee, so I figured that would be way just too much, letting him, grapple himself into the side of the stage and then just hang around down there as long as he wants. Nah. Personally, I'm not a big fan of wall clinging in general in Smash. I think it's just kind of a dumb mechanic, but since it is in the game, and we're going with Breath of the Wild here, it obviously makes a ton of canonical sense. Would it necessarily make Link more fun to play against? Probably not, but canon representation does matter. Trying to hit a proper balance between gameplay and canonicity is tricky. I really found that out while I was working on this project, but I think this is probably justified. A wall jump at a bare minimum, though, that absolutely 100% should have happened. Wall jumps just make characters more fun.
Why not have his shield be Daruk's protection? It literally already is a round bubble shield around him, and it's completely unique to his game. Yoshi has a unique shield in Smash, so why not Link?
So I personally think you don't even need to make the Yoshi argument here. The fact that Yoshi does have a unique shield just blows this wide open, but I think to begin with, there's no longer such thing as a sacred cow in Smash. You can change any aspect of a character if it makes sense. My personal issue with putting Daruk's protection on shield, which is an extremely common fan conception of what Breath of the Wild Link would look like in Smash, is that it's not perfectly circular, and we already have instances in Smash where the bubble shields are not nearly as they don't fulfill the contract of defense in this quite the same way I think they should necessarily. I know you can angle them, and angling it is part of a skill, but you still come across a lot of janky moments in Smash where it's like, come on, he pressed block, really shouldn't he have gotten that? And presumably Daruk's protection would still have a perfectly circular hurt box, so that makes things a little bit incoherent when you've got jagged edges on it. If you were willing to be just a little bit unfaithful to it though, and have it change colors to match the character, because obviously that needs to happen, and then keep it a perfect circle but just put some of the texture from Daruk's protection on there, that'd be enough. At that point I can get on board with this.
His side special could be a Sheikah Slate rune ability, like Stasis, something completely unique to Breath of the Wild, instead of just a boomerang, which isn't even a real item in that game, just a one-handed sword you can throw that comes back to you.
Now this, I've heard people say, I don't like it. I'm sorry, I think Link needs to have a boomerang in Smash. I know that he isn't really using them the same way in Breath of the Wild he has throughout most of the series, but it's such an iconic Zelda item. It took precedent over the bow in Smash 64, right? I think even if you're just going full force into Breath of the Wild mode, you still got to keep the boomerang. I can't do that. My other problem with Stasis, and again, this is a very common request, is stun ain't fun. Paralyzing moves, freezing moves, whatever genre of game you're playing, these are well known for being exceptionally frustrating because they extend the time the control is taken away from the player. Personally, in my Link moveset, I did incorporate the Stasis rune, but I used it in tandem with a claw shot where Link actually uses the claw shot to pull himself into other things, with the stasis rune anchoring those other things in place being the justification for it. Now, that being said, there would be some really cool things you could potentially do with stasis as a side special. For example, you could freeze your own bombs in place. That's trap-based gameplay. A lot of people don't really like trap setup characters, but it would be a really interesting take on it and something totally distinctive to this new take on Link. 50-50, I need to be convinced more.
It sucks even more that he used to have a unique boomerang back in Brawl and Smash 4, where it was the Gale boomerang from Twilight Princess that could pull people in.
Yeah, but it's terrible.
Now he has a boring generic boomerang again, just like his 2 clones.
But it's better, and you can do cooler stuff with it.
Wanting to change the movesets of the original 12 all that much. I really do. But Link has not 1, but 2 clones in Ultimate. The game really wouldn't be missing out much if you gave him a new moveset.
So going back a beat there, I think a lot of the original 12 are actually totally fair game to rework pretty heavily. There are a few Smash characters that I think need to stay largely the same because they're so heavily associated with and iconic to Smash specifically. Captain Falcon, yeah, you change Captain Falcon around too much and I'm gonna riot. Fox, I think, actually fits on there too. He does have more canonical things that you could pull from, but I think Fox as a Smash character is so well defined and well thought out and recognizable. Marth, I think Marth is in that camp too. He's the quintessential sword fighter. And yeah, honestly, I think that's about it. The rest of them I'd be totally on board with reworking.
Even just his normal non-special moves. Breath of the Wild is the only Zelda game where Link can wield completely different weapons that change his moveset without transforming. Being the standard one-handed swords, two-handed heavy swords for strong, slow attacks, and long spears for weak, quick attacks. His smash attacks would be the perfect place for those big, heavy weapons to shine, and his aerials could be a cool place to have him use a spear, maybe for quick, long-reaching pokes, kinda like Byleth's forward and back air. And I mean, he uses different weapons for his moves, so why not Link? You could say Byleth gets DLC privileges, of course, but Inkling also uses different weapons, and she isn't a DLC character, so that's not a real problem, is it?
This is a bit different than how I interpreted it. Again, I'm pulling from sort of a broader pool of source material than PJiggles, so there was room to put the spear in forward smash, specifically the charge attack, and then a jump attack with a two-hander as his up smash. And then I thought I was actually being pretty conservative with the amount of moves I left with the Master Sword, and I still got a bunch of comments from people going like, no, why would you have Link pulling random weapons out? That just makes him feel incoherent. A, I just kind of disagree with that on principle. We already have so many characters in Smash that are built around that to begin with, and B, it's Link. That is the character's thing. That is the Zelda series thing, is large arsenals of different weapons and tools. I'm completely on board with PJiggles here. I don't know if I would necessarily interpret it as aerials versus grounded moves. Directional components might be a good way to do it, but Byleth sort of stole that already. I can see it though. Spears are fast, long-ranged, and weak. Two-handers are slow, big, and strong. It really depends on how you want to balance Link out overall.
At the very least, they did give Link a new fitting Final Smash in Ultimate, so that counts for something, I guess.
See, I actually don't really like this Final Smash very much. It just feels a little bit lame to choose an item that you can eventually get dozens of, and maybe they wanted to avoid spoilers with the Mega Laser from Breath of the Wild. That could be why they didn't choose it. I think that's the obvious inclusion though.
Zelda has never really been a fighter in her home series, she just has magical abilities. So for her Smash moveset, they gave her the 3 magic spells Link can obtain in Ocarina of Time, namely Nehru's Love, Din's Fire, and Ferore's Wind, which I think is really interesting. Her new down special, Phantom Slash, which she got when she was separated from Sheik in Smash 4, is completely made up for Smash, but it references Spirit Tracks, which is really cool considering that's easily the Zelda game where she herself plays the biggest role in both the story and gameplay, and it's still very much a magic attack.
Yeah, I honestly think that's pretty good representation. Obviously, it doesn't really make canonical sense. Zelda should be inside the armor, but for sort of a battle mage concept, it's a fitting way to use it. Or it would be if it wasn't just a really oppressive and annoying and obnoxious and poorly designed move. She needs it, don't get me wrong, she very much needs it, but doesn't mean I have to like it.
Even most of her normals have a magical touch to them. Yeah, moves like forward and backer are just kicks, but they do have that satisfying strong sweet spot mechanic, which also gives it kind of a magical vibe with the sound effects and all.
I don't really think you can get rid of this move at this point. It's, it's a Ganondorf stomp or it's a Marth forward air. It just kind of defines the character in a lot of people's eyes. If I were designing Zelda from the ground up though, this is like the last thing I'd give her. It makes no sense.
Sheik does almost nothing in the only Zelda game she appears in, so the fact they even made her playable in the first place is interesting. I also really like the fact that in Ultimate, they designed her to be based on the Sheikah stealth outfit from Breath of the Wild.
That is cool.
Why not? It's a cute idea. When they made Zelda a character in Melee, they probably just thought it would be cool to give her the ability to change into a completely different character, since she does so in Ocarina of Time, the game all Zelda characters are based on in Melee. And since she's based on a ninja, they just gave her generic, vaguely ninja-like moves, which is fine in my opinion, as there really isn't anything they could base any of her moves on, like, at all. Meaning there's also nothing for me to get mad about. Touché. That said, she does teach Link a bunch of songs on her harp in Ocarina of Time, It could have been cool if she whipped out this harp in a taunt or maybe a victory screen or something, but it's not a big deal. It just could have been neat.
I'll get mad about it. Yeah, I want the harp. This is an idea that Hyrule Warriors tapped into so well, the concept of a ninja that still uses the kunai and does a lot of cool flips and stuff, but also pulls out magical songs. Sheik is a really well-designed Smash character, so I'm not going to get too worked up about it, but yeah, no, I want the harp.
Anyways, that just leaves us with these three abominations: Ganondorf, Young Link, and Toon Link. I'm sure you've heard this one before. Young Link should have been more based on Majora's Mask in Ultimate.
Yes. Now, with the caveat that you can go one of two directions. You can keep Young Link anchored as the template Link and go crazy with Breath of the Wild Link, or you can keep Breath of the Wild Link anchored as the template and then go crazy and make him Majora's Mask. I'm not 100% sure I'd want both, but it barely even matters because they did neither.
This might be a hot take amongst my fellow Zelda fans, but for the most part, I actually think Young Link's moveset is fine and should be kept mostly as is, especially considering I said that Link has 2 clones already, and thus he should get a new moveset. Someone needs to keep that old moveset, and with Young Link being a clone of the original Smash Bros. Link,
I see what he's doing. Okay, so what PJiggles is going for, it sounds like, is Young Link is sort of the template character, but just has a little touch of Majora's Mask in him. I'm okay with that. It sort of gives you the best of both worlds in a sense.
In Majora's Mask, you spend the entire game as Young Link, instead of Ocarina of Time, where you only spend maybe 20% of the game as Young Link. So if you ask me, Majora's Mask is Young Link's main game. This game features the unique mechanic of transforming into different beings through masks, namely a forest-based Deku Scrub, a mountain-based Goron, and a water-based Sora. You hear most Zelda fans saying that Young Link in Smash should have been a swap character where he transforms into these different beings, each with a completely different moveset. And I'm gonna go headfirst in the opposite direction and say no, he shouldn't be like that.
That's fair.
You're asking the Smash devs to make another Pokemon trainer, arguably the most difficult type of fighting game character to make, considering he's 3 unique characters in one. And with Young Link, that would be 4 characters, or even 5 if you include Fierce Deity Link. The Smash devs aren't some group of omnipotent gods that can do anything, you know?
Okay, but they have made Pokemon Trainer is the thing. They can do this. If they wanted to take that approach and they were willing to put enough resources into it, this isn't like an impossible task. But no, I absolutely do not think a swap mechanic is the only way to go here, and if we're taking the approach of making him the sort of template base Link with some additional twists from Majora's Mask, I think that's actually a bad idea.
I think it could work well for his specials, maybe. Just hear me out. In Majora's Mask, Goron Link can use powder kegs, which are huge barrels that leave an explosion much stronger than your average bomb. Sora Link has these fins on his arms that he can shoot out as jewel boomerangs, which of course also then fly back to you. And Deku Scrub Link can burrow into these flowers, shoot out of it, and then glide in the air for a while using these other flowers. The obvious answer would be to replace his down special bomb with a powder keg, his side special boomerang with these Sora boomerangs, and his up special with this Deku flower burrowing gliding ability. The problem with this is that he'd have to transform for these moves, which isn't realistically possible as quick special attacks in a fighting game you can quickly use back to back. So here's what I propose.
Okay, so I'm going to listen to the proposal. For the record, I don't think that having him transform momentarily like that would necessarily look weird at all. You don't need like a full-on Majora's Mask transformation sequence. I think it would be totally acceptable to just have him like poof into the character, do the special, poof right back out. Smash actually gets away with a lot of stuff like that.
Instead of completely transforming, he could just do these moves himself in his human form, and then just have the transformation mask on his head as a small visual change to still represent the mask's abilities being used. He could just carry and throw a powder keg himself while wearing the Goron mask, throw those 2 fin boomerangs just with his hands while wearing the Sora mask, and shoot out of a Deku flower and glide with 2 other flowers in his hands while wearing the Deku mask. This way his specials still feature a bomb and a boomerang technically, 2 super classic Zelda items. And his neutral special is fine as is. The bow is a super important item in Majora's Mask specifically, with the elemental arrows being the dungeon items and the key to a lot of puzzles in them, which is a very unique approach for a Zelda game. It's also why I like the fact that he shoots fire arrows in Smash instead of regular ones.
So first off, can I just say, incredible artwork on these. He's told me that he just got his friend to like whip them up last minute, and Jesus, man. As far as the concept goes, I get it, but I don't think it's nearly enough to appease a lot of Majora's Mask fans. You said that you consider Majora's Mask to be Young Link's main game, which I agree with. I don't think this moveset really looks like it that much, though. The core idea of Young Link doesn't need a transformation mechanic specifically. Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. You could implement it. I think it'd be cool, but mandatory, no. So I think personally, if I were going to do this, I would have him do the specials like you're suggesting here. I think these particular specials are really good. But again, I would just have him kind of like turn into the character quickly, come out of them quickly. I think in a fast-paced game like Smash, that's totally forgivable. No one would really question it. And I'd probably do the same thing for his smash attacks as well, which often tend to be the big dramatic moves that use various items from across a character's franchise, because none of those are really core to Link's identity at all. It's not fair to say they're generic. You know, the triple overhead sword swipe thing is at least different than most other characters do. The choice between 1 or 2 hits between forward smash is actually pretty unusual. And down smash, like, okay, down smash is the most generic thing in the world, but the other two are not super generic, but none of them are core to Link's identity whatsoever. So maybe even just following the same directional conventions as the specials, right? Where down smash is some kind of Goron move, side smash is Zora, up smash is Deku. Maybe for his chamber animations, you could have him holding the mask against his face, and then when the attack actually fires off, that's when he transforms. Just one possibility. I really like the core idea here of keeping the aerials and a lot of the normals just sort of being, you know, Link, the overall Legend of Zelda character, but just letting him lean into the Majora's Mask angle a little bit more. I don't really see a lot of harm in doing that, but it enhances the identity of the character a lot more. If you go that way, though, you then end up with the representative Link who doesn't have a spin attack in his moveset because up special is now the Deku Scrub and down smash can't be spin attack or something like it because it's obviously got to be the Goron thing. It's tricky. There are different ways you could take it, but again, this core concept of keep young Link the template Link and let him have Majora's Mask stuff, I think is actually pretty cool.
And to fix his worst move, Triforce Slash, there's no better choice than having him turn into the fierce deity, right? I've already gone on length before about how much I hate Triforce Slash, Young Link and Toon Link's current Final Smashes. They are completely made up and nothing like this has ever been done in the Zelda series, so it doesn't represent anything either.
So the thing that's been done in the Zelda series that this is sort of based on is wishing on the Triforce, right? Wishing upon the ability to just clobber the hell out of someone. That's sort of what's going on here. Now, the reality of it is this just originated in Brawl, and Brawl was the first game to do Final Smashes, and its philosophy towards them tended to be pretty different. There were a lot less concrete references and a lot more just like giving the characters superpowers, a bit more like a traditional fighting game. So because Young Link is supposed to be sort of representing the past Link in Smash now, you can make an argument for this, except that Young Link wasn't in Brawl. Yeah, I hate this. The Fierce Deity makes so much sense.
The almost completion bonus in Majora's Mask is a 4th transformation mask, namely the Fierce Deity, which you get right before the final boss, and it allows you to absolutely decimate it as an unstoppable beast of a warrior. Needless to say, it's probably my favorite completion bonus in any game ever, and it's become very iconic in the series. It's an available outfit in Breath of the Wild along with his sword after all. His Final Smash should just be anything involving this transformation. I honestly don't really care what he does with it as long as it's not Triforce Slash. It could just be a simple cutscene Final Smash where he just goes ham on you in this form for all I care. It would still be awesome.
That may just be the way you have to go here. I think coming up with an original moveset for, you know, Fierce Deity Link just for a Final Smash is completely unreasonable to ask for, but the Fierce Deity also uses a two-handed sword, which Young Link doesn't, so if you just keep the same moveset but soup it up, that feels kind of weird. Maybe you just have to do that anyways, and he's wielding a super long sword with one hand. He's just that strong. Hell, they did it for Ike. I don't really care about the details too much on this one, but just yes, Fierce Deity.
All of his normals can stay the same, and just like that, Young Link's moveset represents Majora's Mask, one of the most beloved Zelda games of all time, really well. And considering Great Bay is basically his stage, which comes from Majora's Mask, it fits perfectly.
Yeah, this is great. Don't get me wrong, a Clocktown stage would be awesome as well, but asking for more Majora's Mask stages at this point, you know, a bit of a tough sell. And Great Bay is actually one of my favorite casual stages ever.
Now let's move on to a character I actually think has a horribly boring moveset, Toon Link. I already spoke my praise for his inclusion, but man, I hate that he's still just a double clone with essentially zero Wind Waker references in his moveset, or any other Toon Zelda game for that matter. Wind Waker has some very unique items. For starters, the Skull Hammer, which is just a big ass hammer, literally already has 2 uses in the game that could be translated perfectly into smash attacks. The overhead swing could be an easy forward smash, and the roundabout spin is perfect for a down smash that hits on both sides, instead of just being these random sword slashes he has currently. Also, is it just me, or does Toon Link's forward smash look super awkward in Ultimate?
Yes. I like it just in the sense that at least it's something. I'm that desperate for something new for Toon Link. But yes, judged as a standalone move, it looks weird. I don't like it.
And his up smash can stay the same. I don't really care.
I think it'd be weird to have 2 smash attacks that use the Skull Hammer and then one that still uses just like the generic overhead sword arc. At least make it a generic overhead hammer arc.
Considering we changed the other Link's up specials, I think Toon Link's can stay the spin attack. Considering in Wind Waker, you can learn the iconic Great Hurricane Spin, which is basically an insanely long spin attack that you move around with. In an ideal world, they would lengthen the duration of his up special on the ground and allow you to move around with it if you fully charge it, to reference the Great Hurricane Spin, which is literally an idea I've proposed in a previous video before.
I think basically everyone who's both a Zelda fan and a Smash fan agrees on this. I'm still personally not a big fan of using the spin attack as a recovery move. There are so many other options, and I would probably make this side special for Toon Link maybe. He really does need the boomerang though. Yeah, maybe he's the one who gets to keep it for up special. He has by far the floatiest and most cartoony appearance of all three Links, which makes sense with the floaty cartoony nature of his game. So if we're gonna see any one Link lifting himself into the air like a helicopter, I think he's definitely the one.
But something I'd like to add on to it is that if you use it in the air as a recovery, the move will play out as normal, but after the last hit, he will whip out his Deku Leaf and glide for a little bit, which is what you could do with the item in Wind Waker. Yes, this does mean we're giving all three Links a gliding up special, but yeah, so what? They're still semi-clones.
This does give Toon Link a very powerful recovery, and in general, I think you need to be pretty careful with those. The interpretation of regular Link that I came up with actually had a pretty powerful recovery as well, but that's sort of the core theme of his items interacting with each other, and you had to use them in creative ways. But one of the things I could sort of see for Toon Link is being like the beginner-friendly version, right? And one of the ways you often do that in Smash is by giving the character a fairly forgiving recovery. And I actually really like this concept. What if while Toon Link is spinning under the spin attack, he actually whips wind up around himself as sort of a visual flare? Could even give it a little bit of a wind box if you wanted to. That would sort of tie into the theme of this overall character a bit more. You know, considering his first game was The Wind Waker. I like this. Yeah, this is fun.
As for his other specials, I think side and down are perfect as is, no need to change them, but personally I'd change the neutral special to also be the Deku Leaf, but instead have him use it to shoot out a gust of wind as a slower or charge move so you can't spam it.
Mixed thoughts on this one. The Deku Leaf as a projectile is cool, but at the same time, its way more important use as a glider has now been utilized in Smash. And Majora's Mask, I'm okay doing something completely different because that's sort of the premise of the character, but I really do feel like the bow, bomb, and boomerang are just so iconic to Zelda that I'd prefer to see them over not. But it sort of sounds like Toon Link isn't really supposed to be the representative for classic Link at all at this point, so yeah, maybe.
Obviously this would just push the opponents back, so it could be fun to use as a recovery gimp tool, kinda like Squirtle's neutral special, which also does no damage.
That actually wasn't obvious to me at all. It makes sense though. It'd probably be kind of a crappy projectile in a lot of scenarios, but I'm actually okay with that. Toon Link is way too zonery for me as is.
As for his final smash, I honestly don't know what to change it to, considering we already made his up special the Great Hurricane Spin. Though maybe it could be a cutscene final smash where he does the iconic finishing blow he performs on Ganondorf at the end of the game. That would be raw as hell. Literally anything other than his current one would be better in my book.
That'd be cool. The other thing would be maybe him like slashing them into the Great Sea and attacking them with the King of Red Lions. This flooded Hyrule backdrop would be a really cool setting for a final smash though.
Anyways, we're down to the last character, and the one with by far the worst representation.
Yes, in the series.
All his boss fights are super iconic. From the very first one in Ocarina of Time where you play lightning tennis at the top of his castle, to a climactic one-on-one sword duel at the end of a long boss rush with him in Twilight Princess, to my favorite, his final attempt to kill you in the Wind Waker after he lost everything he worked for as the Great Sea above rains down on you.
Not a bad choice.
Boss fights are awesome and I love them. So yeah, let's not reference any of them in his Smash Brothers moveset. I mean, he has this kick from his Twilight Princess moveset, but that's it.
Flame Choke, to be fair. Flame Choke does come from Twilight Princess as well, and Flame Choke is a sick move, and he's got smash attacks that are just kind of Ike and Cloud ripoffs that at least use a sword. Yeah, there's not much.
Instead, he's just a slower, stronger Captain Falcon. That's how he was created in Melee, and that's how he still is all these years later. We can do a whole lot better. He had a taunt and brawl in Smash 4 where he pulled out the Sword of the Six Sages he uses in Twilight Princess, so people wanted him to be a sword character, especially considering he also uses swords in the Wind Waker. And then in Ultimate, they finally made him use the sword for his smash attacks only, which is ironic considering they also remodeled him to be based on Ocarina of Time again. But in that game he never actually used the sword. That sword comes from this Space World 2000 Zelda game teaser, but honestly I think it's fine. He's used swords in other games, and this is the only sword we've ever seen this Ganondorf design use, so it's fine in my book honestly, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense canonically.
This is actually the kind of obscure reference I like Smash making. It actually feels way more appropriate to me for the particular Smash attacks they went with compared to using the one from Twilight Princess. I got no problems with it. The only thing I don't like is, again, the Smash attack concepts are almost entirely ripped verbatim from other characters.
As for his specials, they all suck. They're all still completely based on Captain Falcon specials, and since his are they're all based on fire moves. They just base Ganondorf's on vague purple magic stuff.
Again, I'm coming in to defend a Flame Choke here. Flame Choke is a cool move. It's an actual thing that Ganondorf can do. It's kind of a loose reference, but it is a reference. It's a fun move. It feels very villainous. You can use it in sneaky, underhanded ways. Just make it so it doesn't put him in free fall in midair anymore like the vast majority of side specials do in Ultimate nowadays, and it'd be fine. So no, PJiggles, all of Ganondorf's specials don't suck. Just 3 out of 4 of them suck. Oh.
Falcon Punch? Nah, that's Warlock Punch. Falcon Kick? Nah, that's Wizard Foot.
What the hell is a Wizard Foot?
To be fair, some of the moves have gotten a little more Ganondorf-like. For example, Captain Falcon's Raptor boost has been turned into Flame Choke, which I feel is more fitting for Ganondorf. But still, most of his moves are just vague strongman stuff. Like, what the hell is Volcano Kick even supposed to be based on?
It's based on taking Captain Falcon's melee animation, looping some of the frames in the middle, and then claiming you have an original move. It completely overlaps in functionality with Warlock Punch too. I would say the Warlock Punch is my single least favorite move in Smash, but at least it looks sort of in place on Ganondorf, whereas Volcano Kick, you're seeing what I'm seeing on screen right now. So yeah, I would probably say that of the entire Smash franchise, this is my single least favorite move in it. Giving Ganondorf a good up tilt would be so welcome too.
Instead of Dark Dive, his random up special, why not just make him float? It's the main thing in the debut game, Ocarina of Time. The Smash Mod Hue Draw remix made just that his neutral special, and I think it's perfect. Though if it were to be made an actual recovery move, I think it should go a lot further and also upwards a bit. Kind of like what they gave Dark Samus in this same mod.
Basically every fan moveset of Ganondorf that's ever existed has given him a float of some kind. Completely warranted, and he desperately needs something like that. A portal system of some kind is another common one. I sort of like the idea of using a float on neutral special because it gives him some more mobility options, and then you get to do something different with the up special that's a little more focused. Although I don't even think you really need it on neutral special. Why not just use it as like a Peach and Daisy float or like a Project Plus Mewtwo float, something like that. But I'm way less concerned about the specifics and more just that he has it.
As for what I would make his neutral special, what else but a lightning orb, honestly.
Duh.
It would be especially cool if you could do this during his up special as he floats, like in his boss fight.
There's no such thing as an objectively correct fan moveset, but yes there is because it's Dead Man's Volley on Ganondorf.
Even just by giving him his float, I think he's become a substantially better representation of Ganondorf from the Legend of Zelda series.
Oh yeah.
Other moves, I find it super hard to think of anything else. His awful Smash moveset is just so ingrained in my brain that it's hard to imagine it being anything else. Maybe his down special could be some kind of thrust with a sword as a reference to his Twilight Princess fight. And maybe his tilts and jab can be different sword slashes which you can combo into each other, kinda like Meta Knight's forward tilt, as a reference to how he fought in Wind Waker.
I think if you're going to keep Ganondorf's core the same as it is right now and just make all of his tilts really long-ranged and strong, he's still not going to be the most viable competitive character, but he is going to become even more of a casual nightmare than he is already. That's a big part of the reason why he struggled historically so much in Smash. I think if you want to take the Sword Fighter Ganon route or the Trident Fighter Ganon route, which I'm 100% on board with for what it's worth, you need to rework him a lot more substantially, which I understand isn't really the premise of this video.
And his final Smash is perfect. It's fine. He just turns into Ganon. It makes complete sense.
The only thing I'll say about this is I'd sort of like to see a bit of Ganon influence in the moveset as well. That's just sort of my approach to the Zelda characters in general. Not even necessarily Zelda characters, just Smash characters. I really like it when the entire character's legacy is represented. So if you make transforming into Ganon just the entire premise of his final Smash, like that's the power boost he gets, it sort of cuts off being able to use Ganon sensibly in the actual core moveset. One thing to consider. I'm not saying it's necessarily a problem, it just depends what you want to do.
They could do other smaller stuff to make him more Ganondorf-like also. Hue Draw Remix changes his idle pose to have him cross his arms.
Oh, I love that.
Not taking you seriously, which also feels a lot more fitting for him than whatever the hell this weird pose is. Why the hell does he even do that? Oh right, Captain Falcon does that.
Oh, I've never even made that connection. Why? It's not even the exact same animation. They had to make this separately for Ganondorf, I'm pretty sure.
Why the hell does he even do that? Oh right, Captain Falcon does that.
Yeah. It's original.
It's hard to think of different Ganondorf stuff with him being as he currently is so stuck in my head.
Okay, so one thing back there.
It's hard to think of different Ganondorf stuff with him being as he...
That. Yeah, the shoulder charge, the bull rush, that one I think is actually pretty fitting for Ganondorf, even if it is original, or at the very least, like an extremely loose reference to charges in the boar form. That one I'd be okay with keeping, especially if you want to do a more still like hands and feet kind of fighter.
The problem with overhauling Ganondorf in Smash is that people like his current moveset, and I mean, I get it. I like playing as him too.
You gonna say Black Shadow?
It's completely different. That's why some people have come up with the idea to make Black Shadow
there we go.
with Ganondorf's current moveset instead. For those who don't know, Black Shadow is a character from the F-Zero games. He's an evil and muscular dude, and he has no moveset potential whatsoever, just like Captain Falcon. So making him an official Echo Fighter of Falcon, but with mostly Ganondorf's current moveset, while they also completely overhaul Ganondorf in the same game, would be an absolute perfect solution in my eyes.
It just fits so perfectly, and they're never gonna do it, and I'm so upset.
Stages and music remixes, I think it's mostly fine. I like that there's a stage based on a lesser talked about Zelda game, Spirit Tracks, and I like that some music remixes are absolute bangers like Cass's theme
Yeah.
and the classic Temple remix from Melee.
I'd honestly never really paid any attention to the Cass's theme remix until I went to put it in my own Link rework video. That song goes hard.
One thing I don't like about the music though, is just how many Smash remixes use the main Legend of Zelda theme in it.
Yeah.
Like this one.
That one is awesome though.
And this one. And this one. And this one. Yes, there are even more examples. I could keep going.
The thing is, they all sound good, and I think there's definitely room for a few interpretations of a song that iconic, but yeah, by the time you start getting down to like the Wii U and 3DS regions, it gets a bit silly. But then again, I'm pretty sure the first one he played was an Ultimate remix, if I'm not mistaken, and that's probably my favorite.
So yeah, give Zelda characters better movesets. And who knows, with Tears of the Kingdom out now, Default Link has even more crazy moveset, but
Much more.
I'd love to see what they do with that.
Hey, if you want to see what they could do with that, check out my video on Mock Rock up now.
And maybe they could even introduce a brand new Zelda character that isn't one of the main trio. That'd be wild.
So the thing about these kinds of characters here, I don't think they're nearly worthy of being Smash representatives. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm speaking as someone whose two favorite series are Smash and Zelda. If they introduce one of these guys, I would be ecstatic just as a fan, and I may well end up playing the character, but at the same time, I'd think it was a little bit weird. Minaretting Wolf Link in particular, they can release every single incarnation of Link into Smash, and you are not going to hear me complain about it, but a lot of other people would when their own personal fan favorites don't have one rep, and I would completely understand it. So yeah, this video kicked ass. Obviously, I don't agree with every decision on here. You're not gonna make a Smash moveset pitch video where anyone agrees on every single decision. Smash design philosophy is such an intensely personal thing, and mine tends to be a little bit more on the extreme side than PJiggles from the sound of it. Like, I really like the sort of wackier movesets where things synergize with each other a little bit better. A lot of these pitches just had the core goal of, like, yeah, represent the actual Zelda games in Smash better, which I'm on board with. Thank you to PJiggles for signing off on this. I appreciate it. There's a lot of stuff that I know I'm gonna cut out of this one, particularly from the intro, so if you want a bit more of a comprehensive look, please go check out his video too. I'll have it linked. And yeah, if you want to see my take on a reworked Link, which is a very different format and concept fundamentally from anything in this video, that's up on my main channel, Mock Rock now. Or keep checking out Mock Rock Talk for some other cool stuff. Patrons, YouTube members, and Twitch subs get perks like early videos and Discord access. Later, people.